Hello and welcome back to my channel, my 6 subscribers. Anyways, so I have an update on everything that's been going on. I was able to get into the neurologist because my cardiologist was like, we don't really deal with POTS syndrome anymore, and so you're gonna have to go to another department. So we ended up going to the neurology department, and I also have an appointment scheduled for their electrophysiology department as well because they deal with POTS syndrome. And I was at the neurologist and they were like, there's not much we can do for you in regards to chronic dizziness. We can schedule an MRI and some blood work. So that's been scheduled, but I won't be able to get it until April. So, which, listen, MRIs are like one of my least favorite things to do because I'm extremely claustrophobic. The last time I had an MRI, which was last spring, I was like shaking uncontrollably in the chamber because number one, it's extremely loud, like this loud noise constantly. It's very jarring. Number two, I'm claustrophobic, and number three, my body, my nervous system doesn't function properly, so I'm shaking uncontrollably, and the guy's like yelling at me like, stay still, you have to stay still, and like restarting the thing over and over, and I'm like, I would if I could, but I literally can't. And it was honestly like, I left and I was like, that was one of the worst experiences I've ever had. So I'm not looking forward to it, but they're gonna do a scan on my brain to see like if there's anything abnormal, obviously. And then not this like needing WD-40, but it's helping my current headache, which my dizziness actually hasn't been that bad today, so thankful for that. But instead I have a headache. So like I said before, and I'll keep saying it probably for many years to come, if it's not one thing, it's another. While I am waiting for all of that testing to happen, I asked my neurologist to refer me to Mayo Clinic Neurology because my cardiologist told me that they're doing a lot of good things over there for POTS patients, obviously, because it's Mayo. She put the referral in, and honestly, I've tried to get into Mayo before and failed. I was not expecting them to call me or anything. I was expecting that I was going to have to bug them every day for the next 2 months in order to see if they would be willing to see me. But I got a call on my way home from the neurologist appointment from Mayo Clinic. I was on the phone and they were like, we just got your referral and we're willing to see you. We don't have anything in our neurology department, but we have a POTS clinic in the general internal medicine department. Would that be okay? I'm like, yeah, that would be okay. Like, that's actually better than probably just like the generic neurology department. So they were like, okay, slay. Like, actually, it wasn't slay. The lady on the phone was extremely intimidating because she was like, so in order for you, we'll schedule your appointment for like basically a week from now, which is very fast turnaround time. I was not expecting that. She was like, but in order for you to be seen, you need to go get a physical, just like from a primary care doctor, and all of your medical records from your whole life need to be faxed to us. And I was like, okay, all right, because obviously I'm willing to do anything to get in. I was like, so there's not an email or anything? She's like, no, it has to be faxed to this number. I was like, number one, I've never faxed a thing a day in my life. That's just not something that happens much anymore, at least in the office job that I worked. So I go get my physical today from the urgent care, and I walk in and the lady's like, I tell her I need a physical in order to go to Mayo Clinic, and she's like, well, we're not going to be able to do a full physical today because you need an EKG and blood work as well. And I was like, oh no, I was like freaking out for a second. And then I was like, oh, well, actually, I was at my cardiologist 2 weeks ago because that was when they told me that they couldn't really do much for me and they had to refer me to other departments, and they did an EKG. And she was like, oh, okay, that's fine. You just have to make sure that Mayo has that information. And I was like, and Mayo also scheduled blood work the same day that I have my appointment. So she's like, okay, that's fine. We'll just do like a incomplete physical, basically. I did my physical, and then I came home and I was like, today I should probably fax everything over. So I'm logging into all of my patient portals from all the different places that I've been, which is many different doctors' offices, because I've lived in a lot of areas and I've also just visited a lot of the doctors for health issues. I'm like downloading all of like the stuff and I'm printing them out in order to fax them, and I compile this huge stack of medical records, and like literally dating back to like my birth vaccination records, because I'm so scared that like because the lady made it sound like show up to this appointment with the perfect things in my file that they're just gonna turn me away, and I'm like freaking out. I put all the stuff in a pile and I'm faxing it to the number that she gave me, and it's not going through, and I literally like it won't fax, and maybe there's something wrong with like my printer. I don't know. I honestly don't know. So tomorrow I'm gonna have to go to Staples and have them fax like 40 pages of medical records. But I'm just glad that Mayo Clinic is like willing to see me, and Mayo scheduled like a bajillion different tests for me to do. A heart monitor, I don't think it's for like a long-term heart monitor, because I've had a 2-week heart monitor before. I don't think it's the same thing, but I have to do that. I have to do an x-ray and blood work, obviously, which I hate, because every time I get an IV or blood work, I pass out, and it's miserable. Because I feel awful before I pass out, and then after, obviously. So that's not going to be fun. A bunch of other stuff that I don't even remember, like an ECG. I don't know what any of this stuff means, but they're like, we need to schedule all this stuff. And I was like, okay, we'll do that then. Basically, that's been an update. So it was a pretty big update. It's difficult to find doctors who are willing to take you seriously and who are willing to see you, and a lot of doctors in departments who used to deal with POTS for years prior are now like, I think, overwhelmed by the amount of people who are developing POTS syndrome or any other form of dysautonomia, or any of like those sister illnesses like EDS or MCAS, or you know, anything in that kind of genre. So now it's kind of a little bit more difficult to find someone who's going to be like put together, first of all, do all of the tests that are required to see the full picture of what's going on, and then put together a comprehensive care plan for you. Because most of the time you go to a doctor, they take your blood work just to check. With POTS, it comes back normal, usually. You know, they give you a Holter monitor, or they test your heart rate from sitting to standing and any of that stuff. And then they're like, okay, well, you have POTS, have more salt. We don't know what to do besides that. It can be difficult, and I'm very happy that I live in a city where there's a Mayo Clinic. I can't afford to travel to a Mayo Clinic, so. It's just crazy to me that dysautonomia, which is what POTS is like under, is the second least funded health condition, I think, in the United States, according to the National Institutes of Health. And it's very common. There's a lot of people who have it. I think it's just because they can't really make money off of selling you a medication in order to cure it or to mask your symptoms. There's nothing that really does that fully. Some people do beta blockers, but it's very hit or miss with the beta blockers. Some people react horribly to them. Really, all that they can do to make money off of POTS is to bill your insurance for testing. So that's what they do. And then once you get all the testing, they're like, sorry, can't help. It's very frustrating. I'm just used to having been treated so poorly by the medical community in past experiences that every time I schedule a new testing or some sort of new doctor, I'm like completely so anxious for it. I remember one time I went to get an IV, and getting an IV is a very common thing. It's not necessarily something you need to go to the doctor for. Like, many people get IVs at, you know, these IV places but in the IV place I was going to, this was last spring, also did hyperbaric oxygen chambers and like all this other stuff, and all the reviews were great, and it was very clean inside. It was like a legit place. There were actual nurses there. But I'm sitting in the chair waiting to get an IV, and she has my arm, and she's like, I can't find your vein, which is weird because I've never had issues with that in the past. Whenever I've gotten my blood drawn, they've always found my vein right away. She's like, I can't find your vein. I'm like, oh, that's so weird. And like, I'm looking away because I hate needles and blood and all that. She is like squeeze this rubber ball, and I'm gonna put like a rubber band around your arm to like make the vein more prevalent. And then so she's like, you know, whatever. And then so she puts the IV in, and I swear on everything, she sticks the needle in. It hurts, first of all, which isn't supposed to happen, I don't think. And blood goes into the air and covers my entire forearm. Okay, my entire forearm is soaked in a pool of my own blood right here on the table, or on the chair. And I don't really notice it at first because I'm looking away, and she's like, oh, wow, you have great veins. Girl, I think that my vein did not need to be, like, helped, okay? Because clearly my blood just shot into the sky, and I just lost some much-needed blood. She's, like, cleaning it up, and I start to feel, like, kind of woozy. And then I look over, and I see the blood coating my arm, and I, like, completely lose it. Like, my vision starts to go black, my hearing starts to go, like, I'm soaked in sweat all of a sudden, and it was awful. And she was like just acting like, oh, this is so like, oh, not a big deal. I'm like, you're literally the most inept person I think I've ever met. Like, that's supposed to be something so simple, and it became such a trauma. Like, I was excited to get an IV. She kind of like just ruined that for me. So now every time that I get an IV, I'm gonna be scared that I'm gonna go into pre-syncope again. And she was completely unprofessional. You know, you're a registered nurse, so you're not just some random. I'm sure people would probably say it's my own fault for not going to a doctor and for going to an IV place, but I don't think you understand that so many people go to IV places and it's perfectly fine, and all the reviews were good also. So I don't really think that that's my fault at all. I should feel so rejuvenated and great after an IV, especially if you have POTS. I felt like I was zero energy for the rest of the day. It was just like, what is even the point? Here's another one of my takes. Hot takes, I guess. But, you know, in the olden times, how they used to be like, oh, when a woman would, like, display signs of mental illness or physical illness, they would be like, oh, she just has hysteria. It's just because she's a woman. Women are hysterical. It's hysteria. That never stopped. That's still happening today, but they call it you just have anxiety. It's a different term, and it is the same meaning. You're a woman, and so you're highly emotional, and those emotions are making you lose a ton of weight, feel constant heart palpitations, constant nausea, and feel dizzy when you walk around. No, that's social anxiety. That can't be anything that can't be anything physical wrong with you, because we did a blood test, and blood tests tell you everything, and it came back like with nothing wrong. Blood tests don't necessarily tell you if you have a neurological condition. Tip: if you ever go to a doctor and they're like, well, if the blood test comes back fine, then nothing's wrong with you, they're lying, or they're dumb, and you need to leave. That's happened to me so many times. Usually with like just like primary cares, not really with specialists, because the specialists know better, usually. Stay safe. Anyways, that's the vibe. I'm really full of opinions today. When am I not full of opinions? I just don't always talk about it because I don't know why. I should talk about it more. I'm not gonna stay silent any longer. You can't silence me. Whoever's preying on my downfall, I'm rising above. The alpha always rises above. Okay, wrap it up. We gotta go.